Hello, everyone, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Tari here at I'll Define Myself. Welcome if you are new. Welcome back if you are returning. We are going to go ahead and dive into episode 3 of the Shadow Work series. And today we are going to be talking about emotional triggers as messages or spiritual messages. Okay, so we're diving a little bit deeper as we are unbreaking the foundations of shadow work. So, just a quick recap. Last week, episode 2 was centered on creating safety for inner work. We talked about safety being the foundation of healing, what it feels like for us to be safe. What does that mean to us? Healing isn't meant to be an overwhelming process or for you to relive your trauma. We talked about the importance of creating boundaries, okay? Boundaries for everyone, okay? And that slowing down is a form of wisdom and discernment and not avoidance, okay? And overall increasing self-awareness. So I am super excited to dive in today with you guys to talk about emotional triggers as messengers or spiritual messengers. Um, Triggers. Okay, so what are triggers? Um, for this particular series, we are going to define triggers as invitations to awareness, okay? Invitations to self awareness. So, triggers make you or should make you aware of shifts in your energy, in your body language, in your overall emotional state and being. Okay. I know, for example, that I get triggered I um when I feel like people are ignoring me. Um so for example, if like I ask a question, it's like not addressed, or if I feel like people are just kind of skating around the truth or what it is they really want to say. I am that person where I'm just like please just say it. Like I would rather you say it than avoid me. So I think it's more so I get triggered by people who avoid things. um And I know personally why that is. It is definitely stemmed in um, childhood, growing up, feeling of sorts like a little bit ignored at times or unseen or not noticed or whatever. But I am triggered when I feel I'm being intentionally ignored or avoided, right? And so triggers are meant to bring us to a new heightened level in awareness within shadow work. Okay, so it could be helpful to maybe just take a minute to reflect during this time and think about what what is something that you've noticed over the years or maybe even in the last month that really kind of causes a shift in your energy, what causes a shift in your overall body language or body temp, what is inviting you in to see that this is something that is a little bit tense for you, okay, or it's triggering for you, right? And it's important to understand what our triggers are so that when we are interacting with people, we are better able to articulate what our triggers are. Now, I will say this: you cannot hold people, although it's important for you to express like your triggers and what those are, you can't necessarily hold people accountable for, I would say you can't hold people accountable for what they don't know. Okay. But even then, extend grace, right? Intent means a lot, although I do know that intention versus impact is something that is, very different. My intention could be to sit here, to be in community with you guys, to be vulnerable, transparent, but the impact for being on the receiving end could be received completely different. Okay. So even when and honestly, unless you are, potentially very comfortable with the person, explaining why your triggers are your triggers is like a whole other level, right? Like saying these are my triggers is one layer, but then going into the background or the detail of why these are your triggers is like a completely different layer within the onion, right? And it takes a lot of trust to be able to do that, okay? You don't have to do that now. Right now, we are just trying to sit with and identify what are those triggers for us and how do they make us feel physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. How can you tell when you are being triggered? Okay. It's also important to remember that emotions carry unmet needs and information. So there's a story behind every emotion, okay? In any given situation or circumstance, your emotions are carrying a story. Your emotions are carrying information, right? If you are feeling neglected based off of a conversation there's a story there. There is something that isn't being met for you in that situation. And in order for you to advocate for yourself, it's important for you to have an understanding. First of all, create the space, right? Create that safe space for you to unpack your feelings, unpack your emotions, so that you are better able to articulate and advocate for yourself in any given situation or scenario, right? People don't get to dictate what your triggers are and why. And it's also important that people don't weaponize them against you either. So just be mindful, be aware. I'm not saying that that's everyone's go to, but for some people out there, it is a manipulation tactic. It is a way to get underneath your skin. But shadow work, right, is all about raising that level of self awareness, understanding when we have those pivots and those shifts, and having healthy boundaries, coping mechanisms, and strategies to navigate these spaces, okay? Because we all experience them, all right? I even recently experienced being triggered last night as I was cleaning up and I ran across an old journal. And I've been journaling ever since I was little, but I ran across one from when I was 20 years old and I was just like, whoa, Tari. And it brought tears to my eyes, primarily because it was almost like another version of myself that I'm not going to say I didn't recognize. I fully recognized her, but I just wanted to hug her and I just wanted to tell her, you are loved, you are loved, you don't have to seek validation from, outside people and for people to. And so even in that moment, like I was triggered. And I created the space for me to feel what I needed to feel, acknowledged it, and was ultimately grateful for going through that, but more than anything, growing through that and being in this present moment. I brought myself back to the present, out of my head and into my body, and just held space to be grateful. So, the third point when it comes to emotional triggers as messengers is to remember that curiosity softens reactivity. Okay. So, shadow work, you are meant to be curious about yourself. Okay. Be all into yourself during shadow work. Okay. If you are not that person who really takes that time to really think about your needs, who you are, why you are the way that you are, shadow work will get you there, okay? Because it is meant to heighten your awareness, your self awareness, and overall build that connection with yourself because that's what it is. It's a connection, okay? It is growing and loving and embracing with compassion all aspects of yourself, which means approaching this through a lens of curiosity is only going to help you unpack more. If you think something pops up in your mind, ask yourself why. And then once you answer that, ask yourself why again. Okay? Then ask yourself why again until you feeling like you have broken down and gotten to the root of what it is that is triggering you, why it's triggering you, right? We want to get to the root because we're not here to put band aids over anything, okay? We're not here to leave wounds untreated or anything like that. We are here to treat, okay? We are here to get up in there with the alcohol, let it burn. We're here to clean it up, okay? We're here to use the neosporin. Yes, bandage it, but we are really here to heal. We are here to grow, okay? We're not here to be half in with ourselves because this process, shadow work, isn't about anyone else but you, okay? And we have to remember that to show up for ourselves because you deserve to show up for yourself in this space, okay? Next point when it comes to emotional triggers as messengers is to remember that presence transforms emotional responses. Okay. So, a lot of the times with triggers, it is often, you are often triggered by something from the past, something that you have previously experienced, encountered, lived through, endured, survived, all of the above, right? But it is typically a trigger because it is something that you have experienced previously, which can take us very easily out of the present moment, okay? Which we want to remember the present moment, okay? We don't want to live in the past, we don't want to live in the future, but we want to live in the present. So being aware of our triggers and those shifts, okay, is meant to better equip us so that we can live in the present and tackle that present moment. Okay. Whether it is taking 5 minutes to do some breath work, taking 5 minutes to go to the restroom and cry, taking 5 minutes to give yourself some affirmations, acknowledging how you feel, saying why you feel this way, and then, moving forward in that moment to, handle something or tackle the situation. But ultimately, whenever you are triggered, it is important to remember that you are triggered because of something you have previously experienced in the past. Okay? So it can be very easy to go from a present moment to a past moment. And this being aware of those triggers, again, because the entire process is about heightening our self awareness, is meant to better equip us to move forward in the present moment with processing those emotions in that moment, okay, but not letting it overtake us. All right. The next point to remember is that triggers do not mean failure, okay? Triggers do not mean failure. Everyone has triggers, okay? And some people could have triggers from playgrounds because when they were a kid, they like fell off of a swing, right? Or they fell off of a slide. We don't get to dismiss the triggers of others. And just as this is a shadow work series on your shadow work, it's important to remember that being on the receiving end of someone who is also on a very similar journey, or on the receiving end of someone who is coming to you at a vulnerability, safety, and trust, and letting you know these are my triggers, it is important for us to be keepers for one another during that time and in those spaces. Okay. Now, I will say with that, now, that doesn't mean that it is your responsibility of sorts. And I'm trying to be very intentional with my words because if it gets to the point where someone's triggers it's one of those things where it's like, oh, I'm just triggered, but there isn't any work behind them unpacking the why of why they're triggered, even after you were trying to be present, explain, articulate, in this moment, I'm not trying to trigger you, but XYZ makes me feel this way. This is why shadow work is so important. Okay. It's not just enough to say, I'm triggered and that be it, or I'm triggered and that's your go to, as opposed to just trying to understand and unpack the why, especially when you are in relationships or interacting with, family or coworkers or romantic relationships, your partnerships, all of those things, right? They are an exchange, they are a give and take. And so it's important for us to work on these for growth. It's important for us to work on these for the sake of healthy communication. But once we acknowledge them, we personally are holding ourselves accountable to deal with them, to sit with them, to process them, to work on them. And again, this doesn't mean that they ever go away, but we can recognize intention from receiving parties where you may be triggered. But not everyone has ill intentions when an individual is triggered, right? So there's also a level of understanding that we have to have whenever we are navigating the space, either the ones articulating these triggers or the ones being on the receiving end of it. Okay. It's a very delicate space, a very delicate balance. And for some relationship dynamics, it takes some time. It takes some time to get to know the person, to grow with the person, but also to trust the person. I used to be a person that just gave trust like out the gate, no more. Life happens, life, and you learn. So I'm that kind of person where trust has to be earned. Okay. I'm not just going to give it to you, but I'm also not naturally a pessimist, right? So I do like to hope and believe and see the beauty in people, the authenticity in people. And sometimes you just realize that you just don't align, and that is also okay. Last but not least, emotions are safe to feel at a slow pace. Okay, you can go. I know you guys probably already know of like the tortoise and the hare story, but you can take your time and still get to your final destination. I would even say that taking your time during this process is way more beneficial than trying to rush it. Okay, don't set unreasonable expectations for yourself. And the expectation isn't for you to be cured from this or fixed. I've already said that. Okay. Triggers are triggers for a reason. But we are here to heighten that self awareness and ask ourselves and get to the root of the why so that we can better navigate the space when we are communicating with other people, and even deepening that relationship with ourselves, because sometimes you have to treat people how to teach you, because they don't know you. And even though some of us may have this expectation, well, you should know, you know unless you're a mind reader. Okay, let me know if you're a mind reader. I personally would not want that superpower, reading minds, unless I could turn it off, but that would still be a lot. But either way, slow and steady is going to be beneficial for everyone during this process, for anyone during shadow work, because you really want to be intentional with unpacking the why and understanding how these triggers are tied to your emotions and what needs aren't being met that are causing you to be triggered or feel the way that you feel. Okay? So this isn't meant to be a quick process. Extend some grace to yourself, create the space, okay? And understand that it is okay to have triggers. It's okay to be triggered. This doesn't make you broken. This doesn't mean you failed. This just means that something left a lasting impact on you. But we are here to say, hey, it's okay for me to be triggered. But what can I do to show up for myself in this situation to bring me out of the past and in the present? To be able to move forward, to be able to thrive while still acknowledging that part of myself because it is valid. We're not here to dismiss anyone. Okay? All right, you guys, that is all I have for you for episode 3. I hope that you have found this information informative. And I do hope that you take the time to reflect this week before we get into next week's episode 4, which is going to be talking about the mask that we wear, the mask that we wear, our personas, the ego. Okay, the ego. Are you truly able to be your authentic self? I'm so grateful for each and every single one of you for joining me on this journey. Don't forget, in the description box, there will be reflective questions on episode 3 for you to sit with during the week, for you to process. And I encourage you to share your thoughts or ask any questions. You can leave a comment or drop it in the community tab on my page. But again, I'm sending you guys peace, love, light. And I want you to say, it's okay for me to be triggered. I am trying to understand why I am triggered. My emotions are valid and I am in control. Okay? So please like, comment, and subscribe to the channel if you made it this far. You found it very informational. And I look forward to seeing you guys next week for episode 4. Until then, I'm going to love you and leave you.